Barbara, benvenuto. Hello, it's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, this one is a special one for me. I'm really looking forward to this. As a super short introduction, you're working in security for Allianz Technology, and you are sort of supporting enterprise organizations with your security expertise. So, obviously, we're speaking about agent access and agent access being out of control and how to best adopt agents in enterprise organizations, but keeping their agent or their agentic access under control at the moment. Before we get going, when you think about agents being adopted in the enterprise these days, are you more scared and freaked out about the unsolved security issues, or are you more excited about what agents can do?
I have to say that as I have a tendency to be a little bit paranoid, the first reaction was like, oh no, like no, 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 no. But then once you have the time to step back and think, and you see, okay, how everything is being rolled out. If you are following the different measures at the enterprise level, you have a lot of layered measures one upon the other. So you can start from basic things as awareness, like explaining how to use it and deciding who are you going to roll the tools to. And then you add also these controls at level 2, at infrastructure, the network and everything, and you keep adding to that, and then you keep searching what you could do better. Then you start like say, okay, we are on it, but of course you cannot be outside of it because it's already happening. And if a company and of any size, but mostly a big company, is like missing out on this, you need to be in there mostly as security people also, because otherwise, if you're not using AI actively, you don't know what to expect and what to secure.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'd be actually curious. What I'd love to speak about today with you is what's actually going on in enterprise and larger companies at the moment. You got some really interesting insights there. Then I'd love to go into a conversation around what's really at stake if an agent goes the wrong way, and then most importantly, and I guess that's what everyone is also really interested in, is like, what are the key ingredients for a secure and compliant agentic access setup? But let's start with the status quo in larger organizations. If I simplify, I hear two buckets at the moment. There are companies that are saying, no, sorry for the French, no fucking way, we are not implementing that before some of the security fundamentals are solved and in place. And there are other companies that just implement and say we need to sort of tackle it on the go because otherwise we are missing out. What's the more common picture in terms of AI adoption and agent adoption that you are seeing in larger organizations at the moment?
I think you could see those as like the extremes, and then there's the middle road that you can say, okay, I'm going to evaluate first a series of tools that I want to allow my employees to use, and I will prepare the ground rules and the boundaries, and you have to be quick in that, so you can start to let them use it. And then you are going to find and do all the other rounds of, okay, and now I'm going to strengthen the security, I'm going to raise the level of awareness, I'm going to detect and monitor it all the way so I can see, but I think I wouldn't recommend to any company that they deploy the usage of agents, like internal agents, if they don't have a good ring across the network to prevent, exfiltration or infiltration. Like you really need to have all the configurations as per the proxy and the firewalls to be very prepared to keep everything contained and people educated on data classification and all that also.
Yes. Let's speak about that ring in a second, and I totally hear you, and I agree. Like, my personal take is you cannot not adopt, because even though there are, of course, unsolved security challenges, if you don't get going with it, you won't even learn how to deal with these challenges. Apart from the argument that we hear, of course, a lot is like, okay, if my competition adopts and we are not adopting, then we are falling behind. But it's also the only way to really learn about the specific and inherent security challenges. Before we go into the ring that you just mentioned and all the other, let's say, ingredients of a secure and compliant setup, what I'd love to tap into together with you, Barbara, is like, people are now, you hear it all the time, that it's risky and not really secure and not really compliant to just implement agents. What's the sort of underlying security concern, actually? What is at risk? Like, if you think about uncontrolled agents, what can potentially go wrong and hit a larger organization in terms of nightmares, if you like? What are you thinking about?
I think that the gold is always data. I mean, that's where people are after all the time. That's the ultimate goal, to reach the data. So I think when it comes to that, you really need to be careful on, okay, yes, you have everything that you can build around AI and non-AI, but in the end, what you need to be clear is what type of data are you handling and whether you are going to use AI to process it or not, because you not only, like, for the fear of data leakage or data loss or whatever, is you have regulations. So you also need to care about that. And that you really need to have that in mind before you start engaging in using AI. And that has to be abundantly clear. Because if the users that you are targeting to use AI don't have it clear, then there's all sorts of problems, because it doesn't take an attack to leak accidentally something. It's a misuse of the technology also, that you are doing this to yourself. So you can we are concerned about attacks, but we are also concerned about how can we be the threat.
I couldn't agree more. I must say, I think that's a very important point I would say in pre-agent times, when you spoke about, or when people spoke and thought about security, there was like insider risk, outsider risk, malicious insider. So the idea was always like there's a bad actor and they want to do some harm to you. With an agent that runs autonomously with static access, broad permissions in real time, no accountability, the agent is a risk per se, even if it doesn't turn into a malicious agent or gets breached. The agent simply might decide that it goes and deletes some database or shares some database, right? As a legitimate scope of its job. And that's what you are saying, I guess, right?
Exactly. It happens if you don't know how to use it and what are the boundaries, or know better, like, okay, I mean, we don't have to confuse if we are being augmented by an AI agent, a tool or whatever, by saying they have to have the same permissions as we humans do. Even if we have privileged permissions, that it depends on what are we trying to access, because if you're doing servers, you should have the other controls. Not even the human should be able to enter there. But the situation is that if you have permissions to maybe check a file that it has extra confidential information and it comes encrypted and everything, your AI twin shouldn't be an AI twin. You're not going to use that to read that file, even if the agent allows. Then another thing is that the guardrails that we configure to these agents for internal productivity, that is like not processing the information, that you can configure these guardrails for, so the agent denies, like, okay, I'm not processing this information in any way because I'm detecting that you are using this type of information. But if you go to public AI, I mean, in big enterprises, normally public AI is completely banned, blocked, blah, 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 normally. I expect that all the companies do that. But if you do this for personal usage, it's your information as well. So if you're using your bank data or your, I don't know, children information, it's like, hey, that is going to be there. So be careful. It's not your AI twin. It's not you on a
No,
machine.
exactly. What you're saying there, by the way, is that there's a very interesting consumer use case as well. Yeah, um, giving an agent your credit card details. So interesting. So to quickly recap and summarize, we quickly spoke about now what's currently going on in larger companies. You spoke about the two extremes. Then in terms of what's at stake, yes, I agree. It's ultimately, of course, always about insecurity data loss. I would argue with agents, there's of course other dimensions as well that is not necessarily just restricted to data loss. Think of an agent going into your code base and just rewriting or deleting elements of that code base. Now, let's go into, let's say the really interesting piece, and this is how to build and get going with a setup that at least puts some boundaries, some let's say, security elements around agentic adoption. So if you work with a larger company now, or even if you also think about your company internally, what are the key elements, and you mentioned a few already, in order to properly introduce and then control and govern access of your agents? What are the top things that you have in mind?
I would say if you're doing productivity and in terms of developer productivity or DevOps productivity, infrastructure or anything, agents should be completely away, separated, and segregated from any production workloads. For me, that is not acceptable. No, no, because I mean, I already mentioned, if you want to enter a server, normally you would have a process that is not you entering. You're going through a captive portal. You have a specific role. Your session is being monitored. Somebody else is with you in the session, or maybe approving or not approving what you do. So why an AI workload should be left to do anything? I mean, it was a public problem what happened to AWS with deleting a whole environment because the agent had access to these production servers. So it's like that shouldn't have happened. So it's like the responsibility goes to the person that was using the agent partially, but I would discuss why an autonomous agent was having access, or it was possible for it to have access to the production, and then go to the user role. Why this, if it was using permissions from the employee, it's like why this employee had these permissions to begin with. So it's a layer approach. You really need to say, okay, what do I need to do? So what are the tools and the people, the level of permission? Do I let AI here or not? So you really have to tremble the design of whatever you are doing. And also, last but not least, it's not the same using AI and experimenting with AI like in a controlled environment, like a sandbox environment, because I want to test some particular thing to see the boundaries, than normal user productivity inside the company and then actually putting AI in one of your products. Is 3 complete different levels, layers, and ground lanes to check different things.
So I love your thinking there. Essentially, to summarize that, what you're saying is like agents need proper access control. Yeah. And I love to, obviously I love that topic, and I would love to go deeper into that. And let's maybe break it down, like what is optimal access governance setup for an agent looks like. Maybe we could start with the following question. I keep asking that question. I find it very interesting that people give me very different answers. So if you think about an agent and the identity concept around an agent, so first question, like, is an agent for you more like a human user, like a bot, I don't know, like a non-human identity? It's like, what is an agent like for you? Would you compare to any of those, or is it an entirely new category in your perspective?
Suddenly it's acting more like a human, so sometimes it goes unchecked, undetected if you're not very careful around it, but it's a machine and we should treat it like that, and it's a machine that can fail. So it's like non-human identity, but with human capabilities, sadly, because it's like when it makes the boundary very blurred, and it's more difficult to actually apply such boundaries. So then use case is becomes very relevant use case and other controls that you can apply to the agent but around the agent.
Exactly. I love I agree, by the way. I would also argue essentially an agent reminds me more of a human than of a traditional non-human identity, which was like always strictly deterministic. The agent has almost the creativity, if you like, or the freedom that a human has. It can do weird things. Of course, there are two or three elements that really differentiate it versus the human. It's, I would say, the machine speed and the absolute lack of accountability, or liability. Try to sue an agent, So maybe we're going to see that in the future. That's going to be very interesting. So my next question in this context would be, let's say an agentic identity is a new form of identity, unprecedented. What's the role and permission concept then of a agent identity? Is this tied back to the human behind the identity of the agent? Should it by default inherit the permission and entitlement scope of the human who introduced the agent, or what's your thinking there?
Not by a mile. No, I would think of some, maybe a simple example is if you use the applications like Strava. I think also Instagram has it, and some others. Like, you now can restrict if you're uploading pictures, and you can say, okay, I'm going to do a pre-selection of the pictures I want to upload to the platform.
Yes.
And then for this pre-selection, I even can choose more.
Yes.
So what I'm doing, I, as a user of my device, I can see all my pictures.
Yes.
But then I'm limiting this application to see a subset of a subset. So for me, this is also true for AI. If you think of the cloud IAM system, you can go very granular, and you can even define the conditions into when a process is going to access which piece of information, and you can be so granular. So I would translate this to AI, because it's still a machine. So it is still a non-human identity, but it's mimicking a human.
Yes.
But for this, we shouldn't mistake that for, suddenly it can pretend to be a human, but we need to treat it with zero trust approach here.
So what you are saying is that a fair synthesis? You would not essentially mimic the permission scope of a human who's introducing the agent. I would argue that the human behind an agent is still a relevant input heuristic to determine the scope that an agent will ultimately get, right? I mean, the example I always take, like, I don't know, the CTO of a company introducing Claude and connecting it with GitHub, this agent will have very different entitlements versus, let's say, a junior sales rep who's trying to connect Claude, maybe even to some engineering environments where the default policy should be actually no. So I would argue the human does play a role, but what you are saying is it needs to ultimately go down to the job-specific process environment of a certain job and take that into consideration. Did I understand you correctly there?
Yes, I think that you can apply a certain restrictions, and then the end user should be able to go into a more deeper level. Like, okay, I have access to all this, but I know if I'm integrating different workloads and different agents doing things, I don't want to have to check what they are doing. I prefer to say, okay, I'm sure that the agent should process this kind of information or access these repositories, but the rest I prefer to deny first and allow later, like going to an allow list of permissions rather than the other way around. Mostly when you are going to this sales rep person or a customer, if you're going away, is at some point you don't even know what your access is able to see, and you shouldn't need to be aware of that, because we already need to know what we are doing. And you also have to control your AI twin. That's a lot. That is a lot of friction. And sometimes we get messy. I mean, I organize my files, emails, and everything, but I'm not constantly, organizing everything all the time. So I prefer not to sweat it. it's a no, and then I prefer the agent to ask me, may I do this? No. Yes. That's it.
That's an interesting one. So let me challenge that quickly. Are you saying then that the sales rep actually per default should run an agent with a default denies type of workflow, and they have to proactively give the agent permission step by step? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and it could be like, as I went to the example of the let's say this subset of photos. Imagine that subset of processes or files or anything that the sales rep say, okay, this is safe for the AI to see, but I know that I cannot. For example, if I'm working with contracts, okay, I have the access, not my agent.
Yes.
I'm separating this folder, yes, this folder, no. And then you're conscious about what you are putting in each.
That I agree to. I'm wondering, how do you think about that, Barbara? Is that a decision? What you just said is ultimately, I would call it policy definition, okay? I don't know. Reading contracts per se, no. Reading XYZ is allowed. Who in a company is in charge to put these boundaries into place? Is that the normal, quote unquote, normal end user who might not even have the sort of security knowledge to understand that maybe something they are implementing now is really, really risky? Or who in a company can implement that type of framework in your perspective?
I think it's a joint effort, is shared responsibility between different levels. For example, the TPO would say, okay, this goes, this doesn't go, and then you work with technical and not technical people, like in defining the boundaries of, you classify the data. This shouldn't go anywhere near AI, and you define the policies, and then you can apply certain controls, like enforce controls. But at some point with AI, is like putting doors in the open field, and so ultimately there will be a subset of behaviors or rules that should be explained carefully to the users, to the end users, because okay, we have applied all these controls, then these are all the policies. I translate those policies in a way that you understand, depending on the level of technicality that you understand, and it has to be abundantly clear. And if you have a doubt, then you will have it very visible, what are the ground rules and everything. And you can even enrich the user experience around the agents to put some manage directives, to say, okay, careful, because this, what you're doing is okay, but are you sure you want to do that, when there is a gray area that you cannot fully control. So there's so much you can do, but you have to start at some point. You cannot say, okay, I'm going to be perfect from the very beginning.
No, and that's actually a great point. I'm not going to be perfect, as you just said. Like, if you work with larger companies now, or maybe also internally at Allianz, like how to get going with this. I mean, the truth is we are now adding autonomous agents to the equation, but in most companies, human access is not even really under control. Yeah. So how to get going? If you're working, or if you're helping a company, a larger organization that wants to adopt agents, and that maybe understands that these frameworks are somehow relevant, it's very, very complex from a technical, but also from an organizational perspective. How do you advise companies to get going with a framework like you summarized in the last 15 minutes?
Yeah, first, I mean, depending on the company, I would say two things that should be there from the get-go is network controls, like not only the outer ring, but the inside ring, like, segmentation and all this. So also nice to have. Not all companies can do that, but if you have company-owned device, you have a lot of narrative control there, because you can control what gets in out of those devices. And then, of course, enterprise accounts for the AI tools that you are going to use, because if you're using public AI, yeah, good luck with that. Of course, if we're talking about outer rings, you can control, like, people don't really have access to these public tools. It's not only banned by word, it's banned by configuration. So
yes,
and the same with the exfiltration, like you have your firewall configurations that they cannot, send information somewhere, because it gets blocked. Monitoring, constant monitoring to the process level, of course. And then whatever you can do, because all these tools can be configured, to add managed settings, to say, for example, if you're using Cloud Code, you can also say, okay, the session doesn't get recorded, or and you can add also ban different comments from being executed, or you can enforce, okay, if you then it comes with the user education. If you're doing this kind of operations, sandbox environment.
yes,
Like rules. Of course, there's a moment that you need to trust people, but you really need to put the right training, and then have a lot of clarity on. Of course, data classification is like it mustn't be now like this training that you do at the beginning of the year to get rid of it. Now it's something that you really need to own the data. You really need to know which type of data you're working with. You really need to know that and have it in mind, because it helps you making better decisions.
Yes, very interesting one. Yeah, I agree, by the way, data classification, because with agents now, why data classification is so important these days, because we sort of shifted the boundaries, right? It starts now before an agent can go and access things that it might not actually access. Like people might put data into an agent that they should not put into an agent. That's where the story already starts. And then you're maybe in a shared workspace and someone from HR, I don't know, injected confidential PII or payroll data into a shared workspace agent, and then other people can see it. That's another very interesting use case, by the way, that I've heard a few times now. One thing I quickly, and then, time is flying by. This is
there's a lot of things you can do, actually.
Exactly. We might need to do a follow-up here. One thing that I very quickly wanted to tap into, because it's an important cornerstone, I would say, of a secure agentic setup. How do you think about credentials? So, of course, today, I would say agentic or agent authentication and authorization is not really solved in a great manner today, because what essentially is happening is that humans take their own human credentials in order to authenticate an agent to an MCP server, to a third-party SaaS system. Where do you think in the future, where should these credentials sit? Should they sit directly in this connection between the agent and the respective SaaS system that they are calling and getting connected to, or should there be an independent mediator where the credentials should sit? How do you think about that, Barbara?
Okay, this is since I don't reach this level of configuration, but I can imagine, I can extrapolate, maybe it makes sense. So what is the disclaimer?
Yes.
All credentials should belong in a bot, and then you have ways to, for regular applications to retrieve the credentials with a broker, so the applications never see the credentials.
I agree.
These are never sitting anywhere. They are used only in the moment, like just in time use.
Exactly.
So I would say, of course, all tokens should be short-lived, like just in time.
Yes.
Ideally, because it is a balance with cost and everything, or what you do.
Exactly.
But just in time, and then of course the credentials should never touch anything like is a persistence that is not in a vault with all the policies of rotation and everything. So the agents should also have this mechanism of, if they have to transact with via MCP or whatever, they shouldn't. This credential should be completely transparent to them. If we go to maybe, because since we're saying that AI looks like a human being, if we are going to privileged access management, when you go to a server, normally you go to a captive a captive web, or maybe you go to a jump server or something, and you're logging with your two factors and whatever you're doing as a user, then you get another relay of authentication for the server. So you're never seeing the user that you're using in the end server. So that could be also for maybe sensitive operations, that AI is like, it has a set of keys, but you are putting a different set of keys when it reaches very sensitive operations.
I like that a lot. And what I think is an interesting color of this is that, so yes, the agent shouldn't actually see the credentials. And not only because like for credential breach type of reasons, but also like if we come back to what we discussed earlier, that there needs to be a governance access control sort of layer, then if you make sure that there's no static credential connection, then the agent in sort of easy terms has to apply for each job, and through the credentials you can really make sure that agents can only do or carry out the access that they really need, and that this access is in line with the company's policy. Cool. Last question. Unfortunately, we are coming to an end here.
I would say maybe just to add one thing that maybe looks obvious but not. Of course, no human or non-human identity or synthetic human identity should be able to complete a full process.
Mm-hmm.
Never. Mm-hmm. So because if you can automate that, you're done.
Yes, that's true from a breach perspective. Exactly. And these are, of course, things. There've been cases like the Vercel breach, where external parties use the agent with very broad access into the Google workspace, and then they expanded from there. Very cool one. Barbara, where do you think is the world is moving so quickly at the moment? Like in 12 months from now, we discussed at the beginning of the call that it's still humans who introduce agents, and that probably, I would assume, the human is still, from a legal perspective, accountable for what an agent does and does not. Do you think that this concept will even change soonish, so that agents will be the first identity parameter, if you like, and an agent directly gets access to a system, no sort of human involved anymore, which would be the truly autonomous and agentic workforce? Do you think that this is happening rather sooner than later, or do you think for now agents will be autonomous in their actions, but they will be strictly tied back to a human who's introducing and owning them?
My wish is the second. My hope is it doesn't happen that an agent becomes fully autonomous, because if you think about with current automation, like non-agent, I mean, we have seen all these supply chain attacks that have subverting automation flows, like GitHub Actions, all this, and AI is nowhere near there. So because we are eager to automate our lives completely, that we are creating a lot of friction, and we are always late. We have been late forever to secure everything that we are doing. So we are like trying to do things quicker in less time. So because we optimize, but every optimization comes with the cost. The attack surface is wider, and it doesn't end. Now it's multiplied. So yeah, I mean, I can just hope that it doesn't happen. I think we don't need that level of automation.
Cool. Sure this is a statement that some folks out there are happy to agree with, which is great. So thank you so much. Probably should have a follow-up conversation. For now, this was a super fascinating conversation. Very clear where organizations are between those two poles. Very clear what it says at stake. It's ultimately data leakage, but it's also things like terrible changes to the code base. And I guess very interesting to see that a solid access control and governance framework is for you the first parameter that companies need to implement in order to make sure their agentic adoption is secure and compliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
No, muchas gracias a ti.
Adiós. Chao.
Chao.